Welcome to the third installment of Build With Me, where I'm doing Look Mum, No Hands, and getting Codex to make all the changes, both to the code and also to the services that I'm using. So far, that's just been GitHub and setting up Azure Foundry. In this show, we're going to set up the CI/CD pipeline. So back into GitHub to set up those pipelines, including environment variables and secrets. And we'll create the action, the workflow YAML files, so that the service can be deployed. We're also going to create some infrastructure as code, which will be Terraform, so that we can deploy to Google Cloud. And just because we can, we'll add a toggle to the environment variables in GitHub, so that we can choose if we want to deploy to Google Cloud or Azure. So this is what we've got so far. We've got a React UI, it talks to an API, that then which is a .NET API, which just uses a cache. We don't persist anything with the version we're up to here. And that then uses semantic kernel to then talk to the model that we set up, which at the moment is GPT 5.4 mini. That passes in the system prompt and the user message, the user context, and then we get back some markdown we get a response. So this is a little infographic that I asked Codex to create to set the scene. All right, so now there's a couple things that I noticed. We've called this an open source project, but we don't have, this is an open source project, but there isn't a license file. So just select the most permissive license file to get people to, so that it is as reusable as possible. And there was something else. That's it. Add a contributors markdown file as well, just with standard blurb that goes into a contributors file. Okay, cool. So we've got the license file now, and I don't need those. So I'll just get the license, the contributors, MD, so I'll just add those. And the project log's been updated. Oh, we've got an infographic. If we can, it's not, no, actually, I don't think the infographic is all that good. So I'm just going to leave that, not commit it. The license file is important. Now we have a working service. We need to deploy it. The first step to making that happen is I want it to be running in Docker. So set up Docker. Create a Docker file. For the API service. I'm not sure what the best way to deploy the React files, the React site is. So give me some advice on that before doing anything. Okay, it's saying for the React site, my advice is to deploy as a separate static artifact, which can go to Cloudflare pages, bunch of static websites in Azure, S3 CloudFront, or a tiny Nginx container. Keep the API separate and have the spa call the API. Yep, okay, cool. Docker desktop is not running. Okay, let's fire that up. I'll just get it to stop for a sec. that to start. Get it out of the way. There's nothing interesting there. I've just started Docker Desktop, so it's available now. In terms of the React deployment, just make a note. We're going to deploy to both an Azure static web app, but also to the equivalent in Google Cloud. Cool, so that's finished. Just created the Docker file, which looks pretty good to me. It's using the .NET runtime. I'm not going to add any optimizations to this just yet. It's premature for that, and it's super simple, so we're not going to gain anything. So I'm just going to leave that as is. It's made a note about our API being Dockerized and what we asked it to do with mentioning Google target for Firebase hosting when we deploy to Google Cloud. And yeah, Docker ignore file. So the basic setup is there. Next step would be the Terraform to create the resources. No, next step we'll do the actual CI/CD. Well, CI, we're going to do a build and push of the container. Then we'll do the Terraform, which will create the resources that will get run separately. And once we've run that for 2 different environments, then we'll deploy our container from the container registry. Okay, so we'll just commit those, get that out of the way. Let's get a new chat, bring our project log into context. Okay, we're now going to set up the GitHub workloads. We're going to have 3. One of them is going to be the build of the Docker image and push to the container registry. Remind me to tell you which container registry. The second one will run the infrastructure as code. We don't have that yet. We're not creating that pipeline yet, but it will run the infrastructure as code against a specified environment. We'll have 2 environments, staging and prod. And the third one will deploy a selected image or the last built image to the specified environment, which will again be staging or prod. So we're not going to build that one just yet either, but make a note of it in the project log. And what we're going to build now is the build and push, build container and push, sorry, build image and push to registry. So go ahead and build that. It should automatically initiate, so it should trigger when a push is made to the main branch. Okay, so that's going to create some YAML files for us, and when we push it up, it'll build the container, but the image, I keep calling it container, it'll build the image, but we don't have anywhere to push it just yet. So I do need to specify that. We need a container registry. So that's going to go into, we're going to use whatever the Google Cloud provides for that. So let's create some Terraform. Let's use best practices to set it up. We are going to extend this Terraform to deploy the resources required for our services, but right now, the only resource that we're going to create is that container registry so that when we build the image, we can push it. Okay, so let's just run that and we'll come back once it's cooked. So I'm stopping the video when it's working through my request, mainly to keep the video not long and boring. But I do tend to read the output from Codex as it's working through, because sometimes it does go down the wrong path, but also it's just interesting to see how it's building it, particularly if it's technology that I'm not overly familiar with, because I can learn from how it's approaching solving the problem. So that's finished now. Let's take a look at what it's created. We've got our build file, build API image. What have we got here? Some variables that we're going to need to add, build and push, and check out. Okay, so that looks, at the end, it's going to build and push the image. It's updated our working doc, and this is our Terraform to create the artifact registry. We've got a README file for the infrastructure. Cool. Okay, some variables it will need, and more variables. Okay, cool. So obviously, if you're going to deploy to Google Cloud, you need a Google Cloud account. So that I wouldn't automate. That you need to go in and create it. We're going to need to add these variables, which won't really belong in a open source project. I'm going to add them temporarily for this video, but then I'll have to take them out. So if you wanted to set this up yourself and run it in the cloud, not just locally, you would need to create a Google Cloud account, fork the repository, and add these variables into your GitHub environment variables, for that repo, in order to have the pipeline work from there. Okay, and then we need to create a new project. So I've got a Google account, so I'll log in and we'll assume I'm logged in. Can you create a new project called Interviewer? Do you need any more information beyond the name to create a new project? Now I better actually log in. Okay, so that's logged in, and let's see what Codex says. Get rid of that. Yes, I need one extra piece, project ID. Project ID. No, you choose one, that's fine. And actually what you've put there is perfect because it's going to be fairly temporary. Okay. So it's going to go off and create a project for me. And once I've got the project, we should then be able to run our Terraform for that project once we've provided the the variables that it needs. And these are the ones that we'll need to set. So the project ID, a location, that's fine, and the repository ID. It looks like it'll be ready to go once the project is set up. That's finished, but I can't see it under my either organization, no organization, or else age, which is where I'm expecting to see it. So I can't see it in Google Cloud. Is that because the billing's not set up? Either way, connect the billing and connect it up to RollSage just because that's the billing that I've got there. And don't make this one the global default for gCloud because I want to keep RollSage as the default. And update, when you're done, update the variables in so that we're for the Terraform so that we can run the Terraform. That'll do. Okay, so it's done the variables and set those values, but it had trouble connecting the billing, and something about it's connected to those projects, and it was refusing a sixth project. So didn't know there was a limit. And I can see it now. So it's in the list of projects. Maybe there was a lag, but it's not connected to billing. So I could go in and connect it to that, but I want to try to use Codex to resolve the problem. I can see Interviewer as a project now, so that's there, but it's still not connected to billing, which I assume it will need to be for the container registry to work, artifact registry. I didn't know there was a limit to the number of projects for billing. Is that something that you're able to increase? We only need to increase it by 1. No, it can't increase it. There's a particular workflow you need to go through, have to request an increase. But this massive weft project was the original my first project that was created. So I can just unhook that. There's nothing in it. So let me just copy that. Is the default my first project. So there's nothing in it. So let's disassociate that from the billing so that we can hook up Interviewer. That's still working through that request, but the billing is moved, and then it's gone on to run the Terraform, and it hit an auth failure. So I only did a gCloud auth login, but to create resources in a project, I think you need to do this application default login. So it did that, which gave me a window to confirm the login, and yeah, it's running the Terraform. So that must now be linked. I refresh that. Slow. Okay, Terraform applied successfully, and the registry now exists. Awesome. Okay, so we got in. Don't know what happened there. Artifact registry. There we go. There's our interviewer artifact registry. It's still going. Not quite sure what it's doing. Also recording the applied state. Yep, cool. In the project log. Great. It's time to do some checking in here so we can see changes as they occur. Brilliant that they get ignored so we don't check in files that we don't want to have tracked. Cool. I'll let it finish before I do the actual commit. Just finished. So what changed here? Not really sure. But these are all the new files I did because I didn't check it in before. Let's just commit that so we can see changes going forward. Okay, so we now have the artifact registry. So when it does the build, great. So now when we push our GitHub action, the build action, which I just did, it should work, right? Or is there more changes that we need? Okay, actually, I just remembered. We need to set up some variables in GitHub in the repo. Can you add those variables? We will just have the one registry, artifact registry, for all environments. So we can create those as project level environment variables and obviously secrets. So if we're saving a secret somewhere, then create it as a secret. So what that should look like is in our secrets and variables, it's going to add secrets and variables here. When we have multiple environments, which we will have, we'll have staging and production. So we'll create those two separate environments. If those variables change per environment, which obviously it frequently does for many variables, then yeah, you would define them separately here, the same variable in each of those environments. But if it's the same thing for both of them, then you can just drop it in the project level. Not quite yet, the registry exists, but the workflow needs some. Oh, we also need to set up access, obviously, from GitHub to Google Cloud. So it's going to go off and do that. So let's just let it cook with what it's doing. They're the steps it's going to work through. And I'll report back when it finishes. That's now done. Missing GitHub repo is now done. All set up. That's got those variables. So let's just give that a bit of a refresh. And there's our variables that it's set up. And as it has said here, they're the values. If we were to click in through, we can see them. Because they're not secrets, we can see them. And there weren't any secrets that it created there. No GitHub secret was needed. It uses keyless OIDC through the workflow identity federation. Also apply the IAM setup. So it set up something, the IAM in Google Cloud, which will be this, I presume. Oh, this one, workload identity provider. This is the thing that's allowing GitHub to connect to Google Cloud. So Codex has gone into Google Cloud to set that up and then put that configuration into GitHub. So you can see how using Codex to do this work simplifies so much. Now, I appreciate the fact that my account for both GitHub and Google Cloud has total power, and not everyone has that. So you've got to work within your within what you do have access to. Okay, so yep, that's all set up. Let's run the validate. One important catch, GitHub still cannot see that on the default branch. Why not? Okay, well, what did it change here? Okay, so there's it added that via Terraform, which is, yeah, I didn't specify that, but it just did it. Cool, great. Let's just commit that. And it's noted that we've got the workload identity federation there. Why can't it see our action? Yeah. Okay. We created the workflow. There's YAML there. Why can't it see it? And can you fix that for me, please? I just realized what I did. I committed it, but I didn't push it. Okay, so that's cool. So it's all set up. So now it should kick off. Now, almost certainly there's going to be some errors, and we'll work through those errors when they happen. There we go. There's our workflow, and that's the build API image. It's running through there, and that's the process. And we've already got a problem. Great. The problem was I had committed it but not pushed it. Silly human. So I have now pushed it and it kicked off, but we've already got an error. Can you see the error in GitHub with that build and help resolve it, please? So you can see there, it can see that it failed, what the commit message was. Now it's pulling the job summary and the log for it. Okay. Root cause, the workflow set this environment variable. Fix. Yep. Yep. Apply the patch, please, and then push it. So that's done, patched, committed, pushed, and verified. Void Docker context, environment collision. Tells you what changed, and this is the end result. So if we come back out here, we should have a new build, and that build is green. And it's built and pushed to the repository. There's our repo within the artifact registry, and I'm not quite sure why we've got 3 builds, but 3 images, but there you go. Okay, one small little tweak. Great, that works. I like to have the reverse date in as a tag for the build. Sorry, for the image when we push it to the artifact registry. Can you update it so that it does that with the commit char as an end bit, something like this? Whatever that char is. That's just a personal thing that I like. Just makes it a little bit easier to see which, especially when it's running in the cloud, whatever technology you're running it on. Just seeing some, some random set of characters makes it a little bit harder to determine which version of, quickly visually determine which version of which build it is that you're running. But if you use that reverse date and the SHA, it just makes it that little bit more easier when you're diagnosing problems. For human eyes anyway. And that's done and pushed. So now that I've told it previously to push, it's starting it to automatically push some changes. But I think it'll only do that where it makes sense. I found it did that because it wanted to check that that it worked. So if you don't want it to automatically push for you, just state that and it will not automatically push for you. In this case, I'm happy for that to happen. So we should see another new build, I think. And so therefore we should have, so refresh, yeah. That's not what I'm expecting to see. I'm expecting to see something a little bit more human. Oh no, sorry, there it is. Yeah, there's our tag. But it's actually got SHA in it. Okay, so we can remove that. That's interesting. I would have thought that it would have made a code change. Okay. Interesting. I would have thought that would have required a code change, but I can't actually see a code change. The other thing I noticed that the tag literally has SHA in it. I know I included that in my example, but that was just to show that that's where the SHA goes. We don't need SHA at the beginning. I just realized I usually tell it not to push things for me. The reason why I can't see it here is because it's already committed and pushed it, like we said a second ago. It's early in the morning, so that's my excuse. So I can just get rid of that bit. Okay. Oops, I went a bit too far there. I noticed that tag. So let's do that. That's still relevant, and I suspect it will build and it'll make a change and push it very quickly. Then I'll push it. Yep, I found the exact line. That's now removed it. And it's going to push it and give us a new build. So that's great. So we've now got the build. Next step is the image is there. We need the resource to deploy it to, and to run a container in Google Cloud. You want to do that in a Google Cloud run. Okay. Whilst it's working. Great. I think we're ready to improve our Terraform to create the other resources that we need. We need a secret store, so create that. So it's ready to go for any secrets. And we will have one secret, that being the key to connect to the Azure Foundry. And then we need a cloud run instance, and we need somewhere for our logs to go. So create the storage account for that. And yeah, can you think of anything else that we might need? I don't want it to run on a VNet or anything like that at this point. We're just keeping it simple. And yeah, once you've created the Terraform, just run it locally so that we can see that that works. Let me know any questions that you might have. Yeah, that'll do. Once it's finished, it'll get started on our next task. So now when we get a build, that's a nicely tagged tag. Okay, that's done. So it's implemented the Terraform, it's got created a secret manager, the Cloud Run service for staging, Cloud Run time service account, reader permissions so that the Cloud Run can access the artifact registry, secret accessor permission so that the Cloud Run can get to the secrets, and the GCS log bucket, which is where our logs are going to go, the logging sync, and required APIs. In Google Cloud, you've got to explicitly turn on the APIs for the resources you want to use. That's the URL, which I tried, and it doesn't actually work yet. Even though it says that it got a status of okay, I didn't get that. So we'll investigate why. Azure Foundry is still disabled because we haven't given it the secret yet. There are all the files. And one thing I'd add before the GitHub workflow is the Terraform state is currently local only, and we should add it to GCS. So yeah, add the Terraform state to GCS. That'll do. Just get it to do that first. It's one of the most important things. It's obviously not going to work properly if we tried to run it from GitHub if the state is on my local machine. Okay, our state is now in a Google Cloud backend. All the changes are done. So I'm just going to commit that. It updated the README file as well. It's got a few updates in it with staging, Azure Foundry secret, and public access notes. So just going to commit all of that. So all of those resources now exist. What was the issue before that? Okay, so next step is add this secret to GitHub secrets so that when we deploy this from there, it gets added to the secret store. For now, just use this as the Azure Foundry API key. I just want the secret there, and then we'll give it an actual secret soon. Obviously, because we want to get to a working service. It finished that, so should have the secret in here now. Repository secret says our Azure Foundry API key. But I just realized it should be able to add the right base. It should be able to get the key from Azure because I'm logged in there, and it should be able to add it to there. So actually, I've just changed my mind. Rather than using the sample key, you should have access to the Azure AI Foundry. So go and get the key from there and update that in the repository secret. It's a nice, clean way and secure way to get the secret into there, assuming you trust Codex. Otherwise, you can just copy and paste it yourself. You would just do that manually here, update the value. Done. So it should now have the right key set in the GitHub secret. So I think that once we deploy it from there, then that should work, which would make the API work. Might be missing a couple more things, but there's one important piece that we're missing here is the deployment of the front end. Great. So that's the backend API, which we're now deploying. Now we need to deploy the front end. So create the required Google Cloud resources using Terraform, whatever the best practice is for deploying the React front end. Ask clarifying questions if you need, but otherwise go ahead and change the Terraform and apply the Terraform. End result, I want to be able to hit a URL and see the front end. Yeah, Firebase hosting. Okay, we'll just let it go ahead and make those changes. Nothing outstanding, so we should see those changes up there once it's done. It didn't tell it not to commit, so we'll see what it does. So it ran for quite a while. It worked through a few problems. It's made some Terraform changes, but there's a blocker. Some terms need to be accepted. So it's giving me the link to what needs to be accepted. But the link's not quite right. Maybe I need to create an account with Firebase. Who knows who I am? Get started with a Firebase project. I think Firebase is ready to go now. So that finished, and we can now access the website from here. I don't know if it is going to, I'm not there. I don't know if it's going to, no. Right. I don't know if it's going to actually work. Call the API. Go. Probably not. No, it did. Well, no errors. Let's take a look at what it actually did. Added Firebase to there. And there's an IAM check, which is set to false. So that all looks pretty good. So it's running in the cloud now. What we want to ensure is that when we push a change, that gets deployed. Great. So when the next step now is to deploy, create a new workflow action. So for deploying infrastructure, when we run the workflow, when it appears in the list in the actions, I want it to show which environment it's deploying to. So it should either show staging or prod. So the intent of this workflow is to essentially run the Terraform, applying infrastructure changes for the selected environment. So that's finished. So we should see a new workflow here. We've now got this apply infrastructure. and we can select which branch to build, which environment we're going to deploy to. And it's made a note that it's prod selectable but guarded because it's not currently fully set up to deploy to the 2 different environments, which is fine. So, well, we can just try running it, see what happens. And it pushed it. It just did a plan. So running this, assuming it works, should create all of those resources. Well, and if we make any changes, it will then apply those changes. Okay, great. Make sure the README file and the project log file is up to date with all of our recent changes. Scrap that because I can see it's already done that right there. It preempted what I was going to get it to do. Okay, so yeah, once that's done, now it's pushed it. So there should also be a build in our, let me make this smaller again so I can see, build the API image. So that, yep, built and pushed. So we've got a new version. So I guess, what's our URL that we need to hit again? Don't remember. Here we go. So yeah, that's still working. The thing I want to test is running it from here and seeing in the logs in Google Cloud, which looks like this. We go to the tail end, just see if it hits those logs, because it just proves that we're hitting that back end. So everything is connected properly, can access, the front end can access the back end okay, and the API is talking correctly to Azure AI Foundry. So again, didn't get any errors. Do we have anything interesting in the logs? Starting new instance. Interview session started. Create an interview session. I can see the sessions there, but I can't see the request being made because we added logs to check. So we could see when a call was made to the LLM with some stats about that. Looking in the logs for the API, I can't see the log that we added that gives us metrics from the LLM call, tokens spent, response times, etc. But when I use the UI to start a mock interview, which I did do, I would expect to see something there. Can you check the logs just to make sure I'm not missing something? And then investigate why that call is not being made. Is the secret not accessible? Or yeah, is there something going wrong, or something's not connected properly? Because I didn't see an error in the front end, and I can't really see an error in the logs either. So something's not right. So I'll just get it to investigate. Whilst it's doing that, what I would normally do is have a poke around myself to see if there's anything that I can find. Like maybe just zoom in on what are these errors. Maybe there's something going wrong at startup. Nothing obvious to me there, but I'll just let, for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to let Codex do the work, because that's what we're trying to achieve here with these videos. Okay, so yep, it found that the AOA models enabled was false for the API. So it changed that and pushed that. Infrastructure, this one. So in the TFRs, it's now setting that to true. So overriding that false default. And so now we should see in the logs, and go to the end. I think it did a test. So endpoints created, semantic kernel chat. I think that might be it there. Yeah, so we can see that it called the GPT-5 mini chat. The response length was 244, and it made a note that there's the token usage isn't something that's currently being returned by semantic kernel. So cool. So now if we come back to the setup and just run the job, the project details, which will be this one. So that's our call right there. So this is the response that's come back from the LLM call. Looks like it's returning markdown, which we're not rendering correctly. So we can improve this display field. That's a UI implementation, which we'll do later. But that's essentially it. So now what I want to do is make a code change that will get deployed to via our CI/CD pipeline, and we should see that manifest here. So let's go and do that now. Everything's done there. So let's make that code change. I'll just grab a screenshot. Great, that's working. Let's make a UI improvement. When the response comes back from the LLM, it looks like it's probably markdown. So in the project story, which is I think is where we're showing the initial markdown response, or sorry, LLM response, let's make sure it renders markdown correctly. Okay, so that finished implementing the markdown. The markdown text component. Cool. I'm just going to deploy that because I just want to see what it looks like running the cloud, but we could just run it here. Normally I would run it locally and see what that looks like locally before pushing, but we're going full cowboy mode here. Push that up, it'll create a new build, and it should deploy it, which is the thing that I really wanted to test here, is our process. So coming out here, it's not going to apply the infrastructure. That's a manual thing that we choose to do when we need to do it. Don't necessarily need to or want to run the infrastructure deploy every time you do a code change. Then the build API image, that's what's running now. It'll build and push. But then we don't have a specific deploy step. So that's the next and final piece of our CI/CD pipeline. And it should, okay, so let's go ahead and create that. Need to reset the usage, out of usage. Okay. Great, yep, that works. Now we need the third workflow created, the third action. and that is to deploy a new build of the code for the back end and the front end. We should be able to select whether we want to deploy to staging or prod. It should automatically default for the container, so for the image, it should automatically default to the latest build, but the user should be able to specify an image tag to deploy that tag. Yeah, so, and it should ideally in parallel, it should deploy the front end and the backend API. Ask any clarifying questions if you need. So that's going to go off and do that. I do want to add in, I want to bring GStack back into what we're doing here, just to show a couple more things that you want to use it for. And I've got this prompt that I'm currently using when I want it to run through multiple of the skills sequentially. So running it through the CEO to review what we've done, the CSO, so a security check, and the engineering review. And at the end, it will show us the changes it's made to the documents. So our new workflow is ready. Deploy the application. Staging or prod. Select latest. I'll just keep that. I don't like using latest literally, but we'll keep that just for now. Do we tag our builds in the build and deploy workflow with latest? Even if that's the case, I don't like using latest on a service. We should determine what the latest reverse date tag is and use that tag, because then we don't have a moving target. So that's ready to run, right? And it will deploy both the backend API and the Firebase. Is that correct? So that finished, and now it doesn't default to that latest tag anymore. It just automatically uses the latest unless the reverse date tag, unless you specify something. Great, and staging or prod won't currently work, which is absolutely fine. So the changes it made to the code, that's a separate project log change. Cool, image tag, and that's all been pushed automatically. You can see that there. So in our build, right, so I'm pretty sure if we do this now, it should be using connecting to the LLM, getting a proper response. It's not properly showing our rendering the markdown, but I don't care about that too much. Let's take a look at the logs, just jump to now, and we can see interview created, semantic kernel chat right there is the one we just made. Yep, and so that's working. So what we've done now is we've set up a CI/CD pipeline where we make changes to our code and push it to the main branch via a PR normally. That will then build. Now we haven't set it up to do a continuous deployment, but that would just be a simple command in Codex to hook that up once a build for a change made to main branch is done, to trigger this deploy application to staging only. Our infrastructure is all created with infrastructure as code, Terraform. So that's all automated. The code is there on GitHub for you to check out to see if it qualifies as good engineering.